Sharing go. Thank you for joining our webinar. 5 things you can do right now to prevent getting hacked. So purpose of our webinar today is we want to give you some valuable information that you can use right now and that you can implement. Like there's so many things that you can do from a cybersecurity perspective. But the goal here is we're going to give you a bunch of things that you can make sure that you're doing right now. And then that's the meat and potatoes. Right, Jermaine, we're going to get in the meat and potatoes. And then the dessert is we're going to show you where security is going. We're going to show you how there's like a massive sea change in terms of technology and security. We're going to get into that. But before we do that, little housekeeping, I'd like to introduce Jermaine Clark, who's now our VP of Operations at Techify.
Thank you.
Previously, our Director of Consulting. Jermaine's been with us for 5 years now, and as a result of the value that he provides on a daily basis, continues to get promoted and take on more and more responsibility in our company. My name is Brendan Howe. I'm the CEO of Techify. We do these webinars every third Wednesday of every month, and our goal is to help people keep in touch with what's going on with technology. In a simple way, not super technical. We like to do about 30 minutes of content, about half an hour of content, and then we'll answer questions and we'll dive deeper. If you want us to dive deeper into anything, put your questions in the Q&A panel. If you've just joined and you missed off the top, please answer our poll questions. And then I think we're going to get going. You ready to go, Jermaine?
Always. Let's do it.
All right, we have an overwhelming majority that is, I should mention too, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is why we're doing this webinar, because we think everybody needs to be more aware of the cyber threats out there. Based on our poll question, it sounds like people are more concerned about cybersecurity, which probably means they're more aware of the threats. And the biggest things that we're seeing people implement: multi-factor authentication, upgrading their environment, and training staff. So a couple of people haven't changed anything. We should talk later. And we will I'll leave that poll open for a little bit longer, just as folks join.
Great.
All right, let's get rolling. So we are, we're in COVID times has led to this unprecedented increase in cybersecurity risk. Right? We're all under attack. We're up against organized crime, state-sponsored threats, this dark part of society, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think we're all getting more concerned about it because we see the headlines. There's all these headlines everywhere. It's it's attacking all walks of life. Jermaine, you pointed this out, right? Whether it's a person or whether it's a vet clinic or a dog charity or a hospital or everybody.
Yeah, it attacks everyone. It's not agnostic. It's not out to get anybody specific. It's out to get everybody. And I think early on, over the years, a lot of the questions or the commentary that we've had around cybersecurity has always been, well, I'm a really small business, or I do this, or I sell flowers, and nobody's going to hack me. Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to happen because it's attacking everyone.
Yeah. And the more we realize that, the more we can do about it. And there's 2 things that I got to say really bother me when I see all these headlines. So the first thing that really bugs me is that people are paying ransoms. Because ransomware is funding organized crime and terrorist organizations, right? And people end up paying these ransoms because their systems aren't set up to back up properly, or there's been some sort of mistake that's made. The second thing that really bothers me is some of the stuff that's happening is it's basic stuff, right? Like the Colonial Pipeline incident somebody was VPNing in and they didn't have multi-factor authentication on their email. Like, this is basic. Like, you're running a huge pipeline, huge business, and you don't have that sort of basic level of authentication in place. basic level of security. And it's really, I don't know, just it bugs me, Jermaine. So we're trying to keep people away from having to basically having the same thing happen to you. You can eliminate the majority of threats out there.
Yeah, and I think we set these up to make sure we repeat things over and over again to hopefully scare enough people into thinking about it enough that they'll just do it, right? So that, yeah, like we need to keep that flow going.
All right, so we're going to take you through some interesting stats just to talk a little bit more about the environment out there. Jermaine, you want to do the first one here?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're looking at just 2020 to 2021, year two of COVID, so to speak, about 47 to 55% of all of the recent ransomware attacks are going through what's called remote desktop protocol, or RDP. And this publication, again, if you look at that, that's nearly half of all the computers out there. The people are still, because they're forced to work remote, it's like opening the front door of your house and kind of hoping that nobody walks in and takes your stuff when you have an open RDP port in your environment. We started locking stuff like this down probably 3 years ago in our very first, I believe, ransomware led webinar training, like 3 years ago. It was interesting to see the parallels between then and now, and we're still seeing that today, right? Because not everyone's equipped to make that shift.
Yeah, I was talking to a CEO literally on Monday this week, and he's like, "We got ransomware. It was something about a remote desktop protocol, something that somebody opened during COVID. You know, the all sorts of changes that we made to make it easier to work remotely and faster and stuff like that created all of these security issues. So why are these hackers exploiting these? Because they know they're there, right? And they know that they can go in and exploit them. Some other interesting stuff we've seen: average cost for a breach, data breach in the US in 2021 was $9.05 million, up from $8.64 million in 2020. Obviously, this is across all businesses: enterprise, mid-size, small businesses. But like the scale and the impact and what it costs when you get attacked, if you're a small business, maybe it's only a few $100,000, but a few $100,000 is a big deal, right?
Yeah. And that's your business as well. When you look at that overarching, the average cost for a data breach includes the remediation activities, it includes the insurance companies, it includes the lawyers, it includes the users. If you end up in some kind of a joint lawsuit, like this overarching 9.05 million this year is kind of capturing all of that from a holistic review, and not just the businesses that go out of business due to one of the attacks.
Yeah, and we should point out too, part of the reason in the rise of the cost of breaches is now ransomware isn't just encrypting files. It's encrypting, downloading, exporting, stealing, posting publicly, that sort of thing. So a ransomware attack is no longer just encrypting and creating a big pain in the butt for people. It's stealing as well. They've added an extra component to it. The other thing I found was really interesting with that same IBM security study is it takes a company an average of 287 days to identify and contain a data breach. Wow. So that's longer than the entire NFL season. So you can watch an entire NFL season, and that's the average amount of time it takes for somebody to realize that there's a data breach and contain it.
Well, I mean, and if you're in Canada, obviously it's the NHL season, so we just got to figure out which one's longer and make sure that it's still within the whole sports arena there.
Well, hopefully the Maple Leaf season will be longer this year than it was last year.
We can hope.
A little, yeah. The estimate this year for 2021, the cost of ransomware attacks, it'll cost the global economy $20 billion. $20 billion. Okay, but we want to make sure you don't forget about email hacks, because ransomware gets all the headlines. Email hacks happen every single day, right? People are getting spoofed into putting their email, their password. I keep on hearing these stories of people that email accounts get breached. And then the data in them gets harvested.
Yeah.
And there was one that I've told to a bunch of people, $100,000. So email account gets hacked. All the data gets harvested, figure out which bank the person banks with, what the account numbers were and stuff like that. So then they sent an email to the bank. The person at the bank forgot to do the voice authorization. Can't imagine they're in a good place right now. They didn't do the voice authorization and they transferred $100,000 to a hacker's bank account.
We're seeing this more than than we'd like to be seeing it. And it's always curious. You've got to remember as well that you're looking at businesses being attacked as a whole. Even if there are 100 million businesses in the world, there's 10 times that number of employees with email, right? And it just provides a larger surface area for companies across the board for people who have email. And that includes personal emails. Even one person has 6 different email addresses at 6 different types of hosting services. And now you blanket that across the world, and it's just a much larger surface area. So the percentage of exposure that you're going to get from email is huge.
For sure. So let's get right into it. So what can you do? So we're going to go a little Dr. Seuss style. We talked about 5 things. So we're going to start off with thing 1 that you can do. Jermaine, you want to take us away?
Happy to do it. With everything we talk about this common thread throughout all of our webinars. Everything that we do needs to have a plan. No matter what you're working on, you always start out with a plan and how you're going to get from where you'd like to be to where you want to be in the future. And when you think about that, you have to have a security process in place to audit, review, and align your environment. And then, of course, create a roadmap that starts in one place and takes you to the next level of where you think your organization should be, right?
Yeah, there was a time when it was okay not to have multi-factor authentication in place, right? There was a time when it was okay to use RDP as a remote desktop access for pro, but this stuff changes all the time. And the only way you can keep up with the security threats is if you have a process to audit, review, align, roadmap, right? And the roadmaps that we look at start with level 1, looking at your network and your cloud infrastructure, then start moving into security analytics and policy management. And once you've gotten level 1, level 2 nailed, start going deeper into access management and compliance. And the dessert at the end of our episode today is going to talk about that access management and compliance. And you can even go as far as advanced security monitoring and response. And some folks have that need, but it's that process to continually roadmap and continually change.
If you're like some of our clients as well, you've got massive contracts that you're looking to gain with other organizations within your workspace, and they're going to come back to you and say, well, look, we've got sensitive information, and if you want to work with us, you need to be somewhere in this scale in order to work with our environment and be given the access that you need. And we've got some of our own clients that we work through with that come back and say, hey, Jermaine, can you look at this and tell us if we're within the scope here? Can you look at this questionnaire and help us fill it out so that the organization we're looking to work with has that confidence in our environment going forward?
So you just made me think of another example. This morning, I was talking to a business, and we were talking about how everything used to work much better before everybody was working remotely, right? Before they were all working remotely. So here's another reason why you need that ongoing process is things change in your business. And man, have things changed in the last year and a half, right? In terms of how we're working, and they're changing more with hybrid or people going completely remote or people coming back to the office and changing how they work and stuff like that. You have that security process already in place that can keep up with you. If you don't have that process in place, you're going to have a really tough time. All right, Dr. Seuss, let's go to thing number 2. So I think we've talked about multi-factor authentication a little bit before, right?
Yeah, pretty much half of our webinars have multi-factor in it, but that's because it's very important, very easy to do.
Yeah, you can light it up right away, right? Like you literally just turn this on, and if you do it properly, you can eliminate 99.9% of hacker attacks out there, by properly putting in place multi-factor authentication. And this doesn't cost, like, depending on your setup, this may actually cost nothing to do. Like, it might just be flip a switch. You got to get your staff and stuff on board, but think about something that has huge impact, very little cost. Isn't that what we all want as
Absolutely.
business leaders or executives or staff, right? So Jermaine, why don't you take us through some of the options for multi-factor authentication?
Well, in all of our, when we've gone through in our security webinar and how we can flip a switch and turn on multi-factor, I mean, the landscape has expanded on the number of ways we can now connect, right? Like, you've got wearables, smartwatches, push accept on your mobile phone, key tokens, software tokens, fingerprint reader on your computer. All of these things count as multi-factor authentication. I've got a timeout on my computer, but if I walk away with my mobile phone, my computer's like, oh, Jermaine's no longer next to me. I'm gonna lock the screen and close everything down. So even if I've forgotten and I ran out because there was an emergency, the fire alarm went off, it would turn my computer off and my stuff would be safe, right? So there's so much more out there and so much more ease of access. You can even get a phone call back. Are you one of those people that don't have a smartphone and it's one of those flip phones from the Matrix? No problem. It'll work. We can give you a call back.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gibbs. If anybody ever watched that TV show. So for those of the uninitiated, multi-factor authentication relies on something i.e. a password, something that you have, i.e. a phone or a smartwatch or something like that, and something that you are, biometrics, right? Your face, your fingerprint, that sort of thing. So big deal. If you don't have MFA in place, get her done, people. Okay, Dr. Seuss did not have thing 3, I don't think, but we have thing 3.
Yeah, well, we're Dr. Seuss 2.0 or 2021. So thing 3, if you absolutely are like some of us who forget your passwords and have the same 2 passwords that you put in every single place that you have a password required, then you should invest in a password keeper. Simple, you can set this up in half an hour, put all your passwords in, have a biometric to multi-factor into the the password keeper software, and then go from there. So every time you need to do something, you don't need to memorize the 87 character password. You just log in, copy, paste, authenticate it, move on with your life.
And the reason for this is there's so many websites that are getting hacked, and these hackers know that all of you folks out there are reusing your passwords. So they'll hack one website and then they'll use a bot to try that user and password all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then they'll get a hit. And so here are some of, Jermaine, why don't you show us, actually, just before we go, some of the options. I think it was a really good point you made when we were doing our prep, that the Colonial Pipeline, how they got in was actually a compromised password.
Yeah. So and it's easy to forget. Oh no, they went through the VPN. Well, yeah, because your password was your Facebook password. Your Facebook page got hacked, and then they used your Facebook password on every account they could search on the internet with a bot. And then they came across like, here we go. Let's just make this a disaster area for the Colonial Pipeline, right? And it's important to remember, like, remember one password, use your thumb, use your face recognition once you're in there, biggest password possible, and change your Facebook password. Like, that's absolutely required. So yeah, I mean, these are a few of the top 10. You've got Keeper, LastPass, RoboForm. Any of these can be turned on and implemented. They probably cost anywhere between $2 to $5 per user. So at least start with your executive team. Start with the people that have the most access in your organization, especially to the financials, your locations, and your clients. And then get those people on it, adopt it at an executive level or team level, and then move it into the rest of your organization as you see it being necessary. Super important to have.
So Jermaine, I'm just looking through here, the list of folks that are on our webinar here, and I'm seeing a bunch of names that I recognize. I see partners. I see a new partner in an organization. Congratulations. I see senior executives. I see business owners. I see team members. And as I go through, one of the things that I wanted to point out, so we're talking about very kind of business specific here, but there's a personal side of it too. So if you're a team member, you have a responsibility to help keep your organization secure, but you should also be thinking about your personal stuff. So like if you've got an iPhone, your iCloud should have multi-factor authentication on it, right? Your LinkedIn account, your Facebook account, all those, everything that you have, if you can turn multi-factor, two-factor authentication on, your personal stuff is going to be much more secure. So don't forget about that. That's super important too.
Even my my authenticator app has an authentication on it. So you can't even get into my authenticator app without authenticating first before you could get to my authenticators for the other accounts. So just make it difficult for people, right?
Okay, so let's move to, this is a basic thing, right?
This is a super foundational basic. You know how I feel about the word basic, right? It's not basic training, it's foundational, right? This is what props up your entire organization, and it's something that's super important. Like, you can't defend yourself if you don't get the updates. That's problem one.
And I was gonna say, like, the backup side of things, it just kind of like, it angers me when I read these stories about ransomware victims that can't restore their data from backups. It's like, people, there's so many backups out there that can protect your data. So even if you do get ransomware, you can restore. It's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt, right? But you can restore.
Well, look, one of the key examples on that is one of our clients had, and it's not even an attack, it's a server failed. Physical hardware failed because they need to be hybrid. And they're like, oh my gosh, we've detected this. We have dispatched a tech to replace the drive, so on, so on, so on. What's the client supposed to do for the next few hours? And then what we did, we spun up their backup right there on-prem, utilizing the server resources and linking it to their backup system that's there, and had them up and running in 45 minutes. And they could continue the day. The tech turned up at the end of the day, installed the drive, the RAID was rebuilt, and then the next day we swung their workload back to the server. So even with that, ransomware gets taken. Oh no, ransomware, everything's locked down. Sorry, ransomware guys, I'm just gonna take the backup from an hour ago and restore it onto my machine and move on with my life.
Yeah. Do you want to pay the $100,000 in ransom? No, thank you. I don't.
Absolutely not. And I assure you, it's less than 100,000 for your backup service. So it's good. It's definitely worth it. And then the other part of that is, please do not turn off your computer. You have to get your updates. Okay. Ideally, it'll happen in the middle of the night. But if you're like some of us, where we forget to close an Excel sheet, or, we're like, oh, I can't stop this presentation, and you fall asleep at your machine, and then you get skipped over, it's going to interrupt you at some point in your life, because it's going to say, hey, you can't go further past this point until you do your updates. So update your machines and just let it happen. Right?
So the last, but definitely not least here, is all of our staff all have a role to play. So you can't just say, hey, it's our staff responsibility to keep the company safe. And you can't just say, hey, we have to create the infrastructure and the security and that sort of thing, so that if our staff do something, we protect as a company. You have to look at both of those, right? You need to, like, people are going to have bad days, people are going to make mistakes, that sort of stuff. So you need to protect the company. But you can really increase your security posture by doing some really effective end user training. So Jermaine, do you want to take us through how this works?
Yeah, pretty simple. We work with the organization, and it's not without its challenges. Make sure that we whitelist all the stuff that's required. But the whole purpose of it is to run a simulation that allows the client to be exposed to some information that may look clickable. Here's your UPS delivery. Oh, you just want an Uber Eats card for $10. Click here. Your password needs changing. Click here. And then we provide a training and awareness campaign portion, very short videos, 2 to 3 minutes, just on a topic that can highlight your mind about that topic, give you some key information, and then you go through a quick, survey at the end that says, hey, did you learn anything from this? What is the right answer for these couple of questions? And you move on. The whole thing can be 5 minutes. If you're a repeat offender, of course, and you keep clicking on links that are all spam, then you're going to probably get a 15 to 20 minute video about to stop clicking stuff.
And I think like you want to really dive in. The people that have clicked those messages, the people that have gotten fooled by the simulation, like you don't want to embarrass them, but it's a great learning opportunity. They clicked on something they shouldn't, and that puts your company at risk. So if they did it once, there's a chance they're going to do it again, right? So it gives you an idea of who from your organization. So kind of test phishing or phishing your own staff's been around for a while. It's a really good thing to do, and just even talk, like that's one example, but ensuring that when somebody's onboarded, part of that onboarding is training them on acceptable use policies, what Correct. Expectation is, how we use technology, how we keep the company safe, that sort of thing. All right, so there are your 5 things. There are 5 things you can do right away. They're not super complicated, they're not super expensive, and you can get all 5 of those things rolling pretty quick. Now we're going to talk about where technology is going. So there's a big sea change, right? We used to, I think most people know this, there used to be servers everywhere. We used to have all this on-premise server stuff. People used to log in on their computer and authenticate through a server, what's called a domain controller, and Active Directory, if you ever heard of that stuff before. And when people were occasionally working from home, they would use VPN. Now people are working from home all the time, right? We have these hybrid setups and we have different expectations. And really, the VPN connections, the domain controllers, the old way of Microsoft Active Directory, which is technology based on that really came out in the 80s. That's not good enough to keep us safe. So moving forward, you gotta change, and there's a huge change in terms of security, and we're trying as much as possible to get people to this zero trust model. Now, I'm not talking about personal life and whether there's trust between wife or husband, or whether you trust your kids. We're talking about just assuming a breach is imminent. Assuming even though I have a password, that doesn't mean I'm actually allowed to log in. And there's a really interesting part of the Microsoft 365 cloud and the technology that Microsoft's developed called Conditional Access that we just want to spend a minute on, because we've implemented it here, and we're really strong believers. And the whole philosophy of it is, even if you had my phone, you had my password, and you went to log in, if Jermaine went to log in on his computer and went to log into my account, it wouldn't let him. If somebody over in Eastern Europe or Russia or China or whatever tries to log into my account, it's not going to let them, because that device is not authorized. Similarly, if you don't want staff to be using personal computers at home, which a lot of us don't, you set it up so that you can't, and people can't do that. Do you want to take us through a little bit more about how this works, Jermaine?
Absolutely. And that's a good premise setup. Even staff logging into other staff's computers, right? Because you don't want people logging into each other's hardware, because you want to maintain your office use policy is you maintain your technology stack at our office. You're in charge of that. Don't go logging into somebody else's stuff or any of that, right? And a part of that is, we talked a lot about MFA, thing number 2, and the user has all their devices. They've got multi-factor authentication, but let's say you run to the bathroom when you're at Starbucks and your computer's there with your phone. Somebody can get logged in, steal stuff, do whatever they need to do, mimic your phone or whatever. But then you add in a condition. If you're gonna define a condition for any activity you do as a person, right? Let's say you want to go to the park. Is it sunny? Can we go to the park today? What do I need to go to the park? Is it cold? Do I need food, snacks? You're looking for a condition that allows you to do the activity that you want. And the same goes for conditional access. Let's say you're in the right user group, your location is fine, but the device you're trying to log in from is not yours. Then it says, well, your device hasn't met the criteria of these conditions. So because of that, you can't get in. And that's for any account within the organization, right? So we've got a sample. We ran one internally just to show off the fact that we do it ourselves. And while this is a little bit of an eye chart, when you take a look at it, the primary things to recognize here is one of our team has his account blocked because he tried to log into from his work account from his home computer. And it says, well, everything looks great. Your OTP works, your MFA is good, but hold on a second, your device identifier is not available. Your device state is unregistered. So this is not a registered machine for Techify. So because of that, I'm sorry, you won't be able to log in today. Move on with your life.
And just to be clear, this person had their password, they had their phone MFA code,
thumbprint, smiley face.
Yeah, but the device was not allowed to log into the network, so it was blocked.
Yeah. So this is where everything's going, because again, as we travel around the world and somebody steals your computer. Let's say somebody steals your computer. They run away with your computer and they go to log in from their IP address. The IP address is not a known IP address. So now they're going to have a problem authenticating. Doesn't meet the condition, right?
So this is a great example of one of those things that you have to do moving forward. A year and a half, we didn't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
Now everybody's working from everywhere. This is how you secure computers when people are working from all over the place. Right? You have identity, you have approved devices. Like, stuff has changed dramatically. So at an executive level, this is something you should be saying, okay, we need to have conditional access in place.
Well, it was kind of funny because my new computer was deployed during COVID. So it was deployed at my house, and I hadn't been in the office. And then we started going back to the office. And the first time I got into the office, it was like, oh, this is an unknown location for this machine. You can't log in. I was like, what? This is the office. And I was like, oh yeah, the computer's never actually been here before. So now I've got to authenticate through everything, right? It's important. So it doesn't stop anywhere else. Okay. Well, wow. I think we actually nailed that on the 30-minute mark there. And I'm excited
we were
questions.
Yeah, we were pretty close. So I got a couple wrap up things to do here. I see some questions being added to the Q&A panel here. If you have questions, if there's things that you want us to dive into deeper, please pop them in the Q&A panel. When you leave the webinar, a survey will pop up. Please give us your feedback. As we plan out our webinars moving forward, we take the feedback that we get from previous webinars, and we can keep on building and building. So speaking of webinars, our next one is going to be focused on a bunch of stuff from Microsoft 365, not including email. So there's a lot of people, we get feedback all the time about people wanting to use that huge suite of Microsoft applications to make staff more productive. And what are the different opportunities in there? So we're gonna show some cool stuff. If you have shiny object syndrome, this is the webinar for you, because we're gonna have shiny objects all over the place. If you want to make your staff more productive, this webinar is going to do that too.
Maybe 5 shiny objects,
Shiny
don't want to give too many shiny objects. Maybe just 5. Who knows?
Well, yeah, like we only have half an hour for it, so we can't go too far. But there'll be some good shiny objects. It'll be CEO shiny object worthy.
Nice, good stuff. I like that.
As always, should you wish to contact either Jermaine or myself, there is our contact information. We're more than happy to answer questions after the fact. But in the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing and let's go into our Q&A panel. So our first question for password keeper systems, you've made several suggestions for systems. However, can current Techify customers look forward to a point in time that Techify manages that for the clients rather than the clients managing it themselves? Jermaine, you want to take that one?
Yes. Okay, well, that answers the whole question. Yeah, I mean, so one of the things are again, if we're if we look at this from a, you don't want to have multi-factor authentication and stuff in place, then we can get you set up. And if you still want to have all the password keepers and have 500 passwords because you have that many accounts to handle or whatever the situation is, we can set you up with that. Not a problem. It's something that we can actually just get into your system and just give you the sheets on training, have everybody set it up, and then move on from there. So we can absolutely handle that for you. Yeah.
Cool.
No issue there.
We have another question about how do you manage? So a lot of what we, thanks for that question, by the way, Andrew. A lot of what we're talking about is managing kind of access, authentication, that sort of thing to Microsoft stuff.
Right.
How do you manage, all of the different pieces of software we have, all the different web portals and kind of data is everywhere. Is there a way to centrally manage access to all of that stuff?
Again,
do you want to take this one, or you want me to take it?
Why don't you go ahead? Why don't you start them off?
Okay. So yes, we should get everybody not to ask yes, no questions, because we'll just say yes or no. So where security is moving is, or has moved, is there's a recognition that we have, like, whether it's your Bamboo HRs or your accounting systems or your ERP systems, and then you've got your Microsoft systems and maybe a little Google over here, and we have all this stuff all over the place, right? So we do need to be able to manage it centrally, because when we add a new employee or somebody leaves, going to 16 different places to create users or shut off users is takes a lot of time, right? So there's an engine built in within Microsoft Azure AD that allows for cloud application security, where you can authorize different applications. You can have a single sign-on. You can manage access centrally. Mm-hmm. So you can have all the security that you have in place. You can restrict access to certain devices. You can restrict access to users. You can manage that access centrally, and then you get it kind of in one place, as opposed to somebody forgets to shut off a user here or a user there, and all of a sudden you have a hole in security.
And that also goes back to the original question as well. If you think about, well, do I need a password keeper if I've got one giant password with all the encryption and all of this? Because all of the things that I log into are apps that are housed in our 365 or Google space. And then with that you can now go ahead and have that one-time sign-on. That single sign-on allows you to get into all of those apps in a secure way. So now you're down to managing only one password with your authentication devices. So you've got options in there as well that really does work. And same sign-on has been around for a long time as well, and it has done the due diligence to be in the space of the cloud as well.
Okay.
I've got another one. Peter wants to know, can we still allow users to work from their home machines? Man, is these yes or no questions?
So this is I assume this is a conditional access question, like what we were going through at the,
looks like, yes,
at the end. So if you start restricting people to certain devices, then what if they need to work on their home computer?
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that?
That one's an easy one. We just add the computer that they want to work from as an authorized machine to the system, and then basically, so it's more of so this is what you call whitelisting, where you've gone and you've turned off every form of access, and now you can it's easier because now you allow exceptions as you go along. So adding a person's home machine because they need to work from that at home would be an exception. Takes a minute. You add the new machine as an exception. User can log in. It propagates immediately. Very simple. Yeah.
Perfect. And the other thing you could do, like, it's important with these devices, like if somebody just kind of says, hey, let me work on my home computer.
Yeah.
But their home computer is like riddled with viruses, or it's like Windows Vista or Windows 7 or something like that. you can say, hey,
it won't
like,
meet the conditional access. A part of the conditional access is that a running antivirus is installed. You're no less than 2 patches behind, which is another one we should definitely mention. Now that you've brought that up, if your computer is 2 patches behind, we can obviously change this to 2 or 3 patches behind, and that means updates from whether you're Microsoft or otherwise. You need to be on the new or at least the 2 newest Mac OSs or any of that. We can actually put that in as a condition. So all of the people who let their computers default on updates and then they're like, oh, my computer doesn't work. Well, it's going to lock you out because it'll say, well, your computer's now 3 patches behind. You're locked out. See your administrator. And then they'll have to run the patches. So it's important. That's actually it's a good thing you brought that up. Actually ties really well into that.
So we have another question that we get on a regular basis when we do these cybersecurity events is, what about changing passwords? Do you still need to change passwords every 3 months? Because every time we change passwords, it's a bit of a nightmare for everybody, and people forget their passwords, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So a couple of things. You won't forget your password if you have a password keeper. Let's get those done. Secondly, you can take a longer time in changing your password if you've got a nice complicated password. So if you use your password keeper to store, 24 character password with all of the trimmings in it, and you don't need to memorize that, then you can have that password for an entire year. The challenge is with passwords is that when a compute bot is trying to crack a password, it runs through 5 million types or 5 million permutations that it tries with that password per second. So if you consider 5 million per second and the number of seconds in a year, sooner or later, that bot's going to break your password regardless of how complicated it is, because it just goes through sequential testing of the password, right? So that's the whole purpose behind changing your password. And yeah, you should still do it. Maybe once a year is good, as long as you have the other conditions in place. And use a random password generator. Don't keep trying to make them up. Random password generator, put it into your password keeper, use it in your account, so you know it's secure.
Nice. Jermaine, you want to pick one more question for us to answer?
Sure, why not? Well, let's see if this one works. So I've got Lana here. She wants to know. Oh, that's about our webinar. Yes. Okay. So can you still allow your machine can you still allow your machine to back up? Can you back up your machine and restore a machine based on just the computer itself? So this is a backup and restore question. Sorry, Lana, I butchered that trying to get through it. So the idea here is the same as how we can back up servers. We can also back up email, your entire email tenant, and we can also back up your machine, which is called a bare metal restore or a bare metal backup. So we can put an agent on your machine that backs up the actual machine itself. And then in the event that a machine, gets lost, destroyed, stops functioning, any of that, we can restore that back up to a brand new physical hardware and allow you to work from that one. So yes, we can back up physical computers as well.
I think you made an interesting point there too, that maybe we didn't emphasize as much as we were going through the webinar. We have to change our backup focus, our backup disaster recovery, our data management, that it's not just backing up on-premise stuff that's on a server, right? It's just as important to back up your Office 365 account and what's in your OneDrive and your SharePoint and your Google Drive and your Gmail. And there's all sorts of great, even if you're hosting on Azure, like you've got servers cloud-based. Yeah. Backing up those and doing a cloud to cloud, like independent, going to a different cloud, going from one cloud to another cloud, if that makes sense. Get off my cloud. Having that on another cloud is another layer of protection. So if there's a big whoops or you have a problem, it's needed a lot for compliance and stuff like that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Around insurance, cybersecurity insurance, compliance for other organizations. They say, look, you need to have a completely safe, independent backup to what you have internally. Okay, great.
Yes.
So even if you're in Azure, you're in Amazon Web Services, there needs to be something that backs that functional server with whatever data somewhere else in its own private cloud space. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when I know we said we were going to try to get done by Q2 because we're doing this thing in our office of just booking meetings for 45 minutes so that people can manage their time better and stuff like that. Just one other thing to add, because you mentioned cyber insurance. So if you don't have cyber insurance, it's a standard. It's one of our intelligent technology best practices. It's super important to have that cybersecurity insurance. We've also recently learned a way that you can, we've basically found a system of how the insurers assess risk. So much like you have a personal credit score, every company is starting to get a cybersecurity credit score. And Moody's has just done a $250 million investment in a ratings agency, which actually rates businesses and organizations. And so if your rating is lower, your cybersecurity premiums are actually going to be higher.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. So it's something we're starting to look into for a few people that it's come up for, and we're evaluating it to see if this is something will be broader use. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, please reach out and we'll have a chat about it.
Great. Awesome. The emails haven't changed. And as usual, I enjoyed being here.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? I super enjoy this. I always enjoy hanging out with you, Jermaine. And thank you for everybody that joined. We had a big crowd today. Lots of really good questions. Our next webinar, as we mentioned, you'll be getting emails about it, no doubt. But we'll be diving into more and more of the productivity suite in Microsoft. So,
and for any questions that we didn't get to, we'll just email you guys directly with the answers.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.